Hey everyone, welcome back to the Daily Blend Show. I'm Reed Dailey, and today we're dropping into the world of franchising. We're talking business ownership, long term wealth, and breaking free from the corporate grind. Our guest today is Jon Ostenson, founder of FranBridge Consulting and one of the top 1% franchise consultants in the US. He's not just advising others, he's actively participating in the world of non-food franchises. As a multi-brand franchise, former president of Self Genie with 200 locations, ex-VP of sales at Charters Inc., where he oversaw $300 million in top-line growth and started his career consulting internationally with Accenture, Jon currently spends 90% of his time helping people buy into franchise ownerships so that they can own freedom and build long-lasting wealth. Throughout our talk, we peel back layers on Jon's real-world journey from corporate exec to franchise expert and why he believes franchising is the single most underrated path to business ownership in America. He's going to share non-fluff advice on how his firm works and what every aspiring owner-operator needs to know before signing on the dotted line. Before we jump into it, though, a quick plug and a shout out. So first of all, Jon was kind enough to record this, and I've just been dragging my feet on editing it, and I've recorded this intro so many times, and the last time I recorded it, I looked at myself and said, that's some, Jeb Bush energy. So we're finally getting it out the door, and I'm excited about it. It was a really fun conversation. Selfish plug. You can find this episode and all other episodes on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. So go subscribe there. Check us out on Daily Blend. And if you're social, you can find us on LinkedIn, X, and Instagram. With all that said, let's jump into the conversation with Jon as we discuss franchising, his company, FranBridge Consulting, and much more. Jon, thanks for joining us. Just give us a little background on where you're calling in from and just a little bit of background on you before we jump into kind of you as a franchise expert.
Yeah, so based here in Atlanta, and again, thanks for having me on, Reed. Got a wife and 3 kids that keep me pretty busy, but have really been blessed to, find it something that I'm passionate about, that where I get to help a lot of people and do well. But like some of your listeners, spent many years in the corporate world and kind of climbed the company ladder before eventually jumping into what I'm into now.
Nice. Walk us through kind of like how you define non-food franchising and what that means for folks that are maybe less familiar with the space.
Yeah, like so many of your listeners, I spent many years in the corporate world and working for the man. And whenever I heard the term franchise, I thought, the F word, I thought fast food, right? That's what comes to mind. And, when I had the opportunity to step away from the corporate world about 9 years ago and run a franchise myself called Self Genie, which was a large, franchise across the U.S., I supported all of our franchisees, running the home office team. I really found that franchising is so much more than fast food. There's so many other industries that oftentimes people don't have top of mind, again, when they hear the word franchise, and really fell in love with the franchise model through that experience. So non-food franchising, I decided to be contrarian and really cut out half the market and focus on industries, everything from health and wellness to home and property services, to categories like kids, pets, seniors, really businesses that people will always spend money on regardless of the economy is kind of the theme that we go after. And, I have 2 companies myself, one where we invest in franchises and the one where I spend most of my time, and that's helping other entrepreneurs and investors around the country get plugged in, understand franchising, and then identify the top opportunities for them in their markets.
So let's jump into kind of those 2 things and unpack them a little bit. So let's start with the first on the investing in franchises. So like, what type of businesses or franchises do you typically go after? And sort of what is the lens that you guys do in terms of diligence of saying, we're really interested in this and we see something or we want to pass?
Yeah, the ones that we invest in, are the same types of businesses that we share with our clients. They're ones that have strong leadership teams, a good blend of industry experience and franchise experience on that team. We look at competitive advantages of the business. Obviously, the financial models have to be there. The great thing about franchising is during the exploration process, you get to talk to other franchisees in their system and hear about their experience and ask them questions. So, we're looking for positive validation. So it's a little bit of art, a little bit of science, but some of those that I'm invested in, I've got an asphalt paving and line striping business, essentially parking lots, if you will. I've got one that provides temporary walls, like containment walls around renovation projects and construction sites. It's kind of an equipment rental, B2B type business. I'm invested on the franchisor side in one that provides custom pull-out shelving, for your kitchens and pantries. And we just hit our 100th territory with that one, which is pretty exciting. Again, that one's on the franchisor side. And then I'm invested in one in health and wellness, a business called Foot Solutions, where it's custom. We produce custom orthotics, insoles and inserts for people's shoes using 3D printing, and have that business down in Delray, Florida. So, it's a wide variety of. That's just a sampling of that. The ones that I own, are a small sampling of what we present to our clients. But Reed, I invest in a lot of things. So in my holding company, I've got franchises. I've got a lot of different types of real estate, energy, public markets, private debt. I'm an all of the above approach kind of guy. And, I look for opportunities that provide tax advantages that I think, have good upside potential. And some are a little more fashion forward, like crypto, and then some are a little more safe, like private debt. So it's a good blend. And I do think that franchising or business ownership in general plays a great role within someone's portfolio.
Nice. And talk to me about the second thing, second piece of the puzzle there, helping others get involved with franchising. So back to kind of, if you rewind your own career, you mentioned, you didn't know much about this. Like, how do people typically come and find you, and sort of what is your shepherding of them through the process look like?
Yeah, a good bit of our business is referred to us. We've kind of built a reputation out there in the market, and have done a lot of good work over time. And then going on podcasts, and we put a lot of content on LinkedIn, and so there's a lot of ways that people find us. And the beauty of our business is it's entirely free to work with us. We're essentially a real estate broker, but for franchises. So a similar model where we get a referral fee from the franchise brand when a placement happens. Great thing is none of that's passed on to our clients, so it's entirely free for them to go with us. And we really help them cut through the noise. If someone starts searching for franchising online, they're going to see every company putting their best marketing foot forward. Even the top 100 franchise list or top 50 list, companies are paying to be on that list. It's just a PR move. So there's so much noise out there. And where we come in is, we've got the relationships on the back end. We know what's going on behind the scenes with these franchise systems. I have a tremendous number of colleagues across the country, all working with clients, and we're exchanging, what we're seeing out there. So, there's a lot more due diligence and information that we bring to the table. And, having been a franchisor myself, as well as a multi-brand franchisee, I'm able to bring those perspectives into helping people make a really big decision. And to your question on what the process looks like, I keep it very streamlined. Most of those I work with are mid to upper level executives. They don't have a lot of time. And so we kind of cut to the chase. We'll jump on a call, and then I'll have a little bit of information, have them fill out. And then I'll come back to them with, hey, if I were in your shoes in Kansas City with this background, and based on what I'm seeing out there, based on the role you're looking to play in the business, again, a little bit of art, a little bit of science, here are 10 or so opportunities that we really like that are available in your market, at different price points, different industries, and then they'll narrow those down, and then we kind of hold their hand as they go through the process, having calls with these franchisors and helping them figure out funding and a lot of different pieces to it.
And when you're doing sort of, say, the diagnostic piece, right? Are you looking, is it a combination of geography and kind of, I'll call it like working capital or available capital, or do you sort of look at the individual and what their passions are? Like, what is that sort of thinking and coaching? How do you approach that?
Some of our clients come to us and say, hey, we're really passionate about health and wellness, or we really know we want to get into a property services business. But the vast majority say we're open-minded. Here's some of the skill sets from my background. Here's what I'm looking to do. I'm looking to be hands-on with the business, or I'm looking to put a manager in place day one. And so we kind of get an assessment of their background, what they're looking to do, what their financial situation is. And then we help them, the geography does come into play. I'd say our biggest challenge with geography, I mean, certainly there's some businesses that would do better in Florida than in New York, and we work around that. a lot of it is opportunities move incredibly fast in good markets. So we're constantly trying to identify what are the next big opportunities that still have availability in the markets for them. But probably 90% of our clients end up purchasing something in an industry that was never even on their radar. So they come in open-minded and say, hey, John, we don't know what we're looking for until it's right in front of us. And once we present them with real opportunities, that's where the magic starts happening. They start to have these conversations and they crystallize in their mind. Here are the characteristics that we like in a business or don't like. And it can be an iterative process, but what we found is jumping in, looking at real opportunities early on gives us a really good starting point.
Interesting. And in terms of, I know for you, it sounds like you're much more in sort of aligning individuals to franchises to go after. Do you ever talk to them about sort of the team that they're going to bring on board and what are like the right team structures and how to play to your strengths and minimize your weaknesses as you're looking at targets? Like, what does that conversation look like?
Yeah, we absolutely do. And I'd say for us, it's a little more of a 30,000 foot level. I share with them best practices about, hey, when you hire the general manager, here are experiences I've had or clients of mine have had in the past, that you can glean, insights from, around, the type of job descriptions you put out there and the titles. And, titles are free. And a lot of times people like to be titled up, when they're coming from the corporate world, they like to be president of such and such of Omaha, right? We talk a little bit about compensation packages. I like to present clients or candidates with 3 compensation packages with different levels of varying compensation, a variable compensation. And, that way they take ownership of that. So there are little hacks that I share with them, but a lot of the insight comes from within a franchise system. It comes from other franchisees. They're going to be talking to other people running the same business as them. And in a lot of these systems, there's really good community. They're learning from each other, exchanging best practices. Obviously, the franchisor support team is helping them. So again, that's where it gets a little more granular as far as the team setup and how they go about it.
All right. Very cool. In terms of, you're talking to folks that are looking to deploy capital on the other side of the fence. How do you find the right, organizations that you're interested in sort of helping them do, say, a little matchmaking? Like, what's the framework that you use as you're looking at businesses that you're looking to, help find them potential owners, if you will?
Yeah, again, that's where I think my background, having been a franchisor, comes in handy. I know the lens through which they think, and and I spend a lot of time with the CEOs of these different groups and companies. But what they're looking for, it's someone that obviously you've got to have capital, right? They don't want you just living paycheck to paycheck. That's not going to get you very far. But you don't have to have tremendous amounts of capital. Oftentimes people use SBA loans, and I can get more into the funding side of it. But what they're looking for is someone that's coachable, someone that's willing to follow a system. When I was at Shelf Genie and I looked across all of our franchisees, the top performers were the ones that followed the system the closest. Now, that sounds so cliche, but it's true. If you come in with a lot of baggage and try to be the smartest guy in the room out of the gate, that's not going to work as well for you. There's a reason why you're buying into a franchise. It's to follow that playbook. It's to take the lead of the franchisor. Now, a good franchisor is going to still let you innovate and try new things, but for the most part, 80, 90% of the time, you want to follow the system. But that really, the success traits are you've got to be halfway decent with people. I mean, that's just business 101. And then secondly, you've got to be humble enough and willing to follow a system.
Interesting. That is a really great takeaway in terms of the system. When I think about, folks that want to jump into franchising, I think of someone with a very entrepreneurial spirit. So there's got to be some sort of like give and take as an internal like wrestling as you're saying, okay, I want to go take over something, but I've got to play on someone's playbook. And I'm sure that takes a lot of restraint from people. And sometimes you can be at odds with yourself almost.
And some people are too entrepreneurial. Franchising may not be right for everybody, but my humble belief based on a lot of conversations and years of doing this is franchising presents a better opportunity for most would-be entrepreneurs. It helps them connect the dots and get in the game with some training wheels, if you will.
I like that. That's a great analogy. Maybe talk about just in terms of, flipping this over and talking about your own brand. We got connected through a mutual friend, but obviously in doing the prep for this, you take, personal branding and market exposure very seriously. Talk to me as like you've built your business. What are the things that you're doing to sort of amplify and connect with people? And how do you kind of approach that aspect of your business?
Yeah, what I found, and again, it may sound cliche, but it works, is you give, give, give. And when people are ready, they'll know who you are and what you're about. And so I think putting yourself out there, obviously I'm active on LinkedIn. I do go on a lot of podcasts, but I try to share as much information as possible. And I wrote a book a few years ago called Non-Food Franchising, which I'm happy to share with all of your listeners, free digital copy if you come out to our website. But it's 90 pages of a whole lot of content that really fills in the gaps in people's minds and the understanding of franchising, and gives them examples and case studies and such. So I'd say, just continuing to give valuable, helpful content. Like I said, I spent many years in the corporate world, like many of your listeners. I know where they're coming from. I know what they're thinking, and I know what I didn't know at that stage and what I know now. So just trying to give back, and, been very blessed to, again, most of our business comes from referrals. When people hear the word franchise, or they hear someone looking to make a career transition or step into business ownership, I've been very blessed that oftentimes I'm the one they think about.
Yeah. And I want to go back to something you kind of touched on, was SBA loans. So say someone's interested in franchising but has no money, either is early in the career or just, for whatever reason wants to franchise but maybe doesn't have a ton of money in the bank. What is the process that they go about in terms of working with you and then also going and working with a bank to secure a loan?
Yeah, I think franchising can be a lot more affordable than people realize. And I'll give the caveat that, if your net worth is below $100,000, it's probably not time to buy a business. Save up a little bit more. But, we have a lot of clients that are in kind of the low, maybe 200, 300,000. Certainly we have many that are in the seven figures too. But, from a funding standpoint, most like the idea of using other people's money, right? I mean, that's, in the SBA program, and banks love franchising. It's just a much more predictable. It's not a sure thing, but it's much more predictable than a startup. So getting loans for our clients is usually not very hard. And we've got some great lenders that we work with that do franchise loans all day, every day. And from an all-in investment standpoint on franchise, if you're looking at the franchise fee, the startup cost, and several months of working capital all built in, oftentimes you're in the 150,000 to 400,000 ballpark, and sometimes that could even be multiple territories, like locations. Most people are putting in maybe 15, 20% cash and then using an SBA loan to fund the balance. There's also a program called the ROBS program, ROBS, where people can take their old 401k from a previous employer, roll that over without having the tax impacts, and actually purchase the business with those funds. And then you pay yourself a salary from the business, but it's technically owned by the retirement plan. And there's some neat things you can do around the switching from a traditional to a Roth IRA in that as well. So a lot of different ways to get involved.
Nice. Interesting. Very cool. In terms of, when I think about what we've seen in terms of franchises available, what have some of the trends that you've seen kind of coming out of the last 5 years, and what is really resonating in the market? And it might be different based on the geographies within the states. I'd be kind of curious to hear if geography plays a trend there.
Yeah, I'd say coming out of COVID, we saw a big uptick in service-based businesses, those that don't require a lease. Let's say, they're not customer-facing retail. Maybe it's more like in-home senior care or home and property services, or businesses that are remote. I'll say we've seen the return of retail now. Probably half of our clients are getting into things that are retail based. But from an industry standpoint, we're seeing a lot of interest in health and wellness. That's top of everyone's mind. McKinsey just came out with a study that said it's now a $480 billion a year industry in the US as a whole, wellness industry, and that's projected to grow 10% a year. So it's mainstream now. Home and property services, I'd say, has been the largest area of interest. You see a lot of private equity funding flowing into private home and property services too. Just so many different niches within that space. And people like the non-sexy stuff. It's like dumpsters and roofing and pool cleaning and landscaping and cabinets, all those types of things that aren't going out of style anytime. And then it's things that, people will always spend on. They'll always spend on the things they care about, like their kids, their pets, their aging parents. So many different niches of companies that cater to each of those as well. So from a global standpoint, here in the US, we are seeing more interest than we've ever seen in franchising. Our biggest challenge is the good opportunities move fast in good markets. So in a market like mine here in Atlanta, if a franchise has more than 10 locations, odds are a chunk of Atlanta has already been sold, just because, again, it's a hot market. So we're seeing a lot of interest. And I think COVID caused a lot of people to question the path they're on. Some made the jump at that stage. Some have taken a few more years to kind of get back in the grind, and now they're poking their heads up and saying, I'm ready to build my own empire. I'm tired of building someone else's.
I love that. I love that quote. Question the path they're on. I think that's a great quote. Just in terms of, before we talked, you're down in Atlanta. I'm up here in Chicago. Do you see anything different in terms of geographies, like of trends that are, maybe besides senior care down in Florida for obvious reasons, but in the Northeast corridor, Southeast, Southwest, Northwest, or is it brands sort of organically expand? What are you seeing in terms of trends?
Yeah, there are 14, I'll try not to go too far down this path. There are 14 what we call registration states in franchising, where every year when the franchise system comes out with a new FDD, franchise disclosure document, there are 14 states that have to wait to essentially sign off on the new FDD before they can go sell new licenses. So California, New York, Illinois, Washington, and then you have some random ones like North Dakota. So we're in that time of the year right now where we're waiting on a few of those. So that's probably one impact, but that's always been the case. As far as trends, I do have, I just had a client that moved from Pennsylvania to Florida. I mean, some of those logical things that you hear in the headlines are playing out. But I've got to be honest, I'm still doing a ton of deals in New York, in California, in areas that aren't getting a lot of positive publicity. There's still a lot of economic activity on the ground. And, a lot of people are, kind of digging in and not relocating in such a big way. I think, you've had lower housing inventory, higher interest rates. People are saying, hey, again, let's stay where we are and let's make the best of it. And maybe it's time to step into business ownership.
As you have conversations with people who are wrestling, do I want to go this route? And they're thinking of buying a franchise or exploring buying a failing business, or maybe a business that they think has some value creation levers that have not been unlocked. What is typically like the sort of, narrative you'll provide to someone or food for thought of trying to decide which route to go?
Yeah. I get that question multiple times every day. And, buying an existing business can be a great proposition, but usually here's what I hear over and over and over. Every one of these. I've been looking for an existing business for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. I've been under LOI 7 times. I've had due diligence not shake out. Someone came in and outbid me. Over and over. So again, you'll be on the sidelines for a long time if you're trying to buy an existing business, whereas franchising lets you get in the game and start building. And it's not that you'll never buy a business, but it's like, what's right for that next season? Are you ready to get in the game, or do you want to be out there? I know guys that literally hire full-time analysts looking for businesses for them to buy. You're competing with private equity, and there's risk to buying an existing business. So on day 2, it could be after the deal closes, you could lose key employees, you could lose key customers. I mean, whenever there's a change in ownership, things are going to happen that are unplanned. And here you paid a premium for the business. So what I found is a lot of people come around to the idea of franchising, where maybe it takes a little more work in the early going to get it off the ground, but you're able to put your thumbprints on there. The team that's in place is your team. You've got a proven business model with a franchisor on the sidelines supporting you. And so then I have clients say, well, what about an existing franchise? Franchisees eventually sell their businesses. Our biggest challenge is there aren't many good ones available out there, because the good ones are bought by other franchisees within the system. They never hit the open market. I've personally sold franchises myself to other franchisees. I've also bought other franchisees' businesses. So once you get in that ecosystem, it allows you to expand organically or semi-organically by acquiring other franchisees over time as well.
What do you tell your I'll call them brothers from another mother that have been in the food franchising world that want to come into this space? How do you say, come over to the promised land, if you will? Like, what are some coaching, or what is some differences that someone who maybe was in the food space is exploring other things? Like, what do you say to them?
Hey, I've got nothing against the food guys. I love them. We support them. We need them. My humble belief is there are just easier ways to make money. There are ways that require less capital in some cases, fewer employees, less operating hours, maybe higher margins due to not having food waste, opportunities that aren't susceptible to consumer whims. Always talk about frozen yogurt being big until it wasn't. And so again, we don't like trendy. We like understandable cash flowing businesses. And that being said, when I see a food one that I like, I do present it to my clients. There are 2 that we're working with right now that we like. So we're not totally opposed to food, but the core of where we go deep is in all these other businesses. But no, I've got a lot of clients that have been in the food space. We had some recently that owned 12 McDonald's and they sold those, had a great run with McDonald's. It was very good for their family. But they came to us and they bought 10 trampoline parks. Now, this was a big deal. Those are like $3 million each, right? But they fell in love with the brand and the company, and it was just a match made in heaven. But no, we do work with some food folks, but most of our clients, again, come to us saying, hey, we're interested in things outside of food.
I have a 7-year-old, so I've been to a few of those trampoline parks, and I got to say, they're pretty fun.
They print money.
They do print money, and what's really sad is you're old when you try to get on a trampoline and you say, wait, I probably shouldn't be doing this anymore. So anyway, Jon, tell folks that want to get in touch with you. Obviously, we talked about the book. Tell them how they can find you online, how they can connect with you, and what they should do in terms of like when they're coming to you beyond, hey, I'm interested. Like, what are some things that they can start to do as a primer for a conversation with you?
Yeah, I always say that reading the book's a great primer. And again, we have it in audio, downloadable. You can buy the print version. All the proceeds go to a great charity that we support, Hope International. So, it doesn't take that long. Most of our clients have read the book by the time we get on the phone because, again, it's 90 pages, easy read. But if you come out to our website, franbridgeconsulting.com, that's F-R-A-N, bridgeconsulting.com, share your email address. My assistant will reach out and share, links to download the book. We'll get you on our newsletter list that goes out every 2 weeks. We try to put out some really good content. Certainly follow me on LinkedIn. I put out content most days. But yeah, if you'd like to take a next step and jump on a call, when my assistant reaches out, just reply back that you'd like to set up a call, and she'll send you the calendar link. And yeah, love fielding those calls and helping people kind of navigate, is this a good fit for them? And if so, what are those opportunities to make the most sense?
Nice. Well, Jon, thanks for tuning in, and I appreciate you joining us on the show.
Enjoyed it, Reed. Thanks for having me.